beggars. They refused to sign, even if it meant risking their lives. After all, what else did they have left? Finally, the neighbors decided their only hope was to head to the city and plead with Ethan. In their eyes, he was now the only person in the entire world who could possibly save them. When faced with absolute despair, pride and dignity quickly lose their value. A few dozen representatives pooled together the last of their meager savings to afford the trip. They rented 2 rickety, open-top trucks that looked like they might fall apart at any moment. And so, after 3 long hours of rattling through the biting autumn wind, they arrived at the gates of the Albion Agricultural Group on the outskirts of the city. They called out for Ethan, begging for the man they once knew to come out and face them. When the secretary saw this desperate scene unfolding on the security monitors, she was stunned. She went to inform Ethan, who was in the boardroom reviewing the provincial agricultural weather reports. He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked down at the villagers lined up below. They were kneeling on the harsh asphalt outside the main gate, pressing their foreheads against the cold ground. Their initial greed had been utterly shattered by the harsh lessons of reality. Ethan put on his overcoat and, accompanied by the legal director and several security guards, he pushed through the imposing electric gates and stepped outside. Upon seeing him, the village chief stood up, his face drenched in tears. He cried out that they knew they had been wrong, calling Ethan by his childhood name. He cursed the man who had betrayed them and that heartless company. They had been deceived into ruin, and now they were on the verge of losing their land. He begged Ethan to find it in his heart to save the village, promising they would work like animals for him, so long as they could keep their land. Ethan looked at the village chief and spoke calmly. He reminded them of the day they used red ink to sign him away and what he had told them then. Life and death, giving and taking. Everyone is ultimately the master of their own destiny. Because they had been so hungry for those cheap, false advantages, they had easily handed over the village's entire reason for being to a group of swindlers. They hadn't just trampled on his hard work, they had trampled on their own safety net. By all rights, this was a bitter fruit they should have been forced to swallow themselves. But Ethan knew that his own ancestors were buried in that very soil. His father was there, and while he could choose to disown his treacherous relatives, he couldn't simply stand by and watch the village where he was born and raised be devoured to the bone by corporate vultures posing as tech innovators. The chief asked with a glimmer of hope if Ethan was truly willing to take care of them. He made it clear he wasn't running a charity. He was a businessman, first and foremost. If they wanted his help, from that moment on, every single rule in the village would be his to make. He turned to his team and told Mr. Miller to alert the fleet immediately. They were to bring every piece of evidence and follow him back to the village. He wanted to see, once and for all, who would dare touch the land beneath Ethan's feet. An hour later, 5 black commercial vans appeared on the horizon. With an overwhelming and undeniable presence, they roared into the village committee courtyard, completely blocking in the collection fleet belonging to the predatory manager Wallace. The doors slid open, and Ethan stepped out of the car looking impeccable in a tailored suit. Behind him stood 2 elite lawyers, looking every bit as sharp and formidable as their employer. Manager Wallace was baffled at first, but then he recognized the man standing before him. It was the province's rising star in the agricultural sector. His expression shifted instantly, though he still approached, desperately trying to maintain a facade of calm. He greeted him with forced cheer, acknowledging the great CEO of the Titan Group. He asked if Ethan had returned home in glory, but reminded him that today was for debt collection. He questioned if Ethan intended to interfere with what he called a normal, legal judicial proceeding. Ethan simply repeated the words, debt collection, with a cold, knowing smile. He asked Mr. Miller to read the findings aloud, so everyone could hear the truth. According to the Provincial Quality and Technology Supervision Bureau, the smart pumps sold to the village contained internal motors that were actually nothing more than refurbished industrial scrap metal. The power ratings were falsified by up to 300%, and the equipment lacked any mandatory state safety certifications. It was, in every sense of the word, a completely defective and low-quality product. Manager Wallace shouted that they were lying and pointed to the contract, but Ethan only offered a cold smile. He pointed out that the company had used these defective products to engage in blatant, deceptive advertising. Furthermore, they had forced contracts with hidden clauses and added illegal charges under the table, all of which pointed towards serious acts of commercial fraud. To be honest, they weren't even trying to hide it. Our story takes a turn as Ethan reveals the Titan Group had already officially represented the villagers to file a formal complaint with the Municipal Police Economic Investigation Brigade. The legal director standing behind Ethan stepped forward, asking to add one final, crucial detail. He made it clear that his team of elite lawyers intended to pursue this case to the very end. They wouldn't stop until they stripped the company bare and ensured their legal representative ended up working a sewing machine in a prison cell, which, naturally, was exactly where he belonged. Ethan then gave the final order. They were to take their people and get out of his village immediately. Manager Wallace looked at the formidable wall of lawyers standing in formation behind Ethan. He watched the villagers, who had found their courage and were now clenching their fists once more. Realizing that this time, he had run headfirst into a very real, very solid wall. He didn't dare utter another word and, along with his collection team, fled the village in total disgrace. Suddenly, the entire courtyard of the village committee erupted into thunderous shouts and cheers. We see countless villagers bowing deeply toward Ethan, their faces filled with relief. This time, the gratitude shining in their eyes was pure, without a single hint of doubt or impurity. Driving out the Lu Yuan company only solved the village's most urgent problem. To truly revive this land, Ethan knew they had to tear everything down and start from scratch. On the following day, the engineering caravan from the Titan Group rolled into the village. They didn't just bring brand new, high-standard, large-diameter pipes. They also brought back that same old, common electric motor he had seen years ago. However, after being upgraded by the technical team at his farm, it now boasted a state-of-the-art variable frequency control system. Accompanied by the powerful roar of the old motor, water began to gush once more through the new network of pipes, finally soaking the cracked and thirsty orchards. We see the villagers standing in the fields, letting the water droplets splash against their faces, as they wept like children. But this water was no longer a free lunch. The water had arrived, but the rules of the past had to change. The days when he provided the money and effort while they enjoyed the benefits without lifting a finger were gone forever. From this day forward, the Titan Group would take total control of the village's hydraulic facilities. Water fees would be charged at the lowest market price, not a penny more, and not a penny less. At the same time, he offered them a choice. If they were willing, they could all join his ecological supply chain. He would provide free technical advice and high-quality seedlings for everyone. There was only one requirement. They had to strictly follow the standards for chemical-free cultivation. This meant avoiding all pollutants from the Titan Group's list. The private use of banned pesticides and fertilizers was absolutely forbidden. If they were capable of producing high-quality goods, the Titan Group promised to buy every single harvest in the autumn, offering a price 20% higher than the current market rate. However, anyone who tried to cheat or damage the village's reputation would be immediately expelled from the partnership and never accepted back again. There would be no more charity, only cooperation, and certainly no more blind indulgence. Only rules remained. To be honest, that was the truest form of respect and the only way to achieve lasting redemption. With trembling hands, the mayor was the first to solemnly sign the cooperation agreement. He pressed his red thumbprint onto the paper and looked at Ethan, telling him the village's entire future was now in his hands. The old man admitted they owed him everything and asked Ethan to lead the way from now on. He vowed they would all follow him, and if anyone showed a double heart again, he would personally break their legs. Hundreds of villagers formed a long, orderly line, without a single fight or a word of complaint. They understood now, no charity, only work. The mayor signed again for the official records, sealing their path forward, and they all promised to follow Ethan's lead. The mayor repeated his warning, making it clear that betrayal would be met with a very personal kind of justice. He was quite serious about the consequences for anyone who dared to harbor dishonest intentions toward their benefactor. And so, with the eventual arrival of spring, the peach and pear blossoms on the mountains began to glow like vibrant, colorful clouds. By the time autumn returned, premium fruit hung heavy from the branches, filling the air with a sweet, intoxicating scent. Thanks to the high-end, temperature-controlled logistics chain provided by the Titan Group, the village's fruit arrived directly at luxury supermarkets in the country's major cities. The villagers' income increased fivefold compared to the past. A welcome change, to be sure. The young people who had left to find work began returning home, one after another. Every family rebuilt their home and bought cars, and we see that the village was soon filled with laughter and joy every single day. At the village entrance stood a new landmark. The gate had been widened and renovated, looking truly imposing and majestic. In front of the modern pump house, the villagers took the initiative to raise money and erect a tall, clear stone monument. There were no superfluous words of flattery to be found. Only 8 large characters engraved there. When drinking the water, remember the source. It spoke of effort and heart. To be honest, it was a simple but powerful sentiment. This was a sense of gratitude etched into the very bones of the village. It was also the greatest sign of respect for Ethan. One early autumn afternoon, he drove his car back to the village to personally inspect the results of this year's fruit harvest. As soon as his car reached the entrance, he was surrounded by enthusiastic neighbors. Auntie Wendy insisted on stuffing a basket of freshly picked apples into his trunk, choosing only the largest and reddest. With misty eyes, she took his hand and called him director. She urged him to try them, claiming this year's fruit was exceptionally sweet. She wondered aloud how they could have ever seen such a day without his help. Ethan simply smiled as he took the apple, greeting his neighbors with a familiar warmth. He felt a deep sense of village affection that he hadn't experienced in a very long time. However, as he passed some crumbling red brick ruins at the edge of town, we see a familiar silhouette. It was his uncle, Ian. He was sitting in a rusty, broken wheelchair, looking completely disheveled and filthy. In his hands, he clutched a broken, dented bowl that was deeply sunken in. While his son remained in prison, Ian had been left paralyzed by a stroke. barely surviving now thanks only to the monthly charity of the villagers. With a twisted mouth and cloudy eyes, he stared fixedly at the joyful, bustling scene. The man who once tried to ruin the entire village for a pittance now watched as, under Ethan's leadership, everyone moved toward a shared and lasting prosperity. He alone remained eternally isolated from this newfound happiness and wealth. It was his cruelest punishment, and to be honest, his most just one as well. Ethan didn't stop. He simply pressed the accelerator, and the car glided smoothly past. Next to those ruins, the sweet scent of mountain fruits drifted through his window. The evening breeze arrived just as the clouds finally cleared from the sky. Looking at the land full of life, his heart felt an unprecedented sense of peace. True strength, we realize, isn't about simply crushing the wicked into the mud. It is about rising above it, setting new rules, and dismantling lies with absolute power. It is about reshaping the soul of the land with a broad and generous vision. This land, heavy with fruit, had finally found its path clear at last. As for Ethan, he found himself carrying the weight of this heavy social responsibility.